heard it in the news headlines. J. Arthur Brown will not be going today to jail. Today, the former Fidentia boss was fined 150,000 rand or 36 months behind bars. He's paid the fine. That means he's now a free man. Well, we are now joined by one of Fidentia's co-curators, Dines Gihwala. He's on the line with us from Cape Town. Dinesh, your reaction firstly to today's sentence?
Shock, utter shock.
Is it fair enough to say that J. Arthur Brown has got away with a whole range of charges, including money laundering, outright theft, and he's basically been found guilty of a few dodgy investments?
Well, that's a question, Ra, better put to the National Prosecuting Authority, whose responsibility it is to charge people. And I wouldn't want to engage on that topic. It's not for us, for the curators to decide which charges are put to the accused and so forth. But on the evidence that we have had and which we presented, the curators certainly are of the view that with what he was finally charged and convicted of, and the sentence makes a mockery of the legal system.
Well, you've actually looked at the books. Have you seen a wide range of evidence for fraud, for all the things that the judge said he could not sentence J. Arthur Brown for because there was simply not enough evidence brought by the state?
Yes, Francis, it's very difficult for me to answer that question because I don't know what evidence was put before the court. I don't know what agreements were reached with the accused.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Do you see evidence that he was guilty of theft?
Absolutely.
One of the big issues is the Living Hands Trust that paid out monies to widows and orphans of mine workers that were killed on duty. What has been happening since 2007 when you took over, when these people come forward and they want payments, do you have to say there's nothing there, or have some payments been done?
Well, we've paid in excess of 200 million rand to those people indirectly. The curators are not responsible directly to pay those victims. There's what is called the Living Hands Umbrella Trust, which has its own trustees. And over the years, we've made some payments to them, firstly directly, and secondly, as recently as about 6 months ago, we paid about 90-odd million rand to the Living Hands Umbrella Trust for distribution to beneficiaries, which distribution in itself is a major task that the trustees had to undertake in order to identify the victims, exactly where they were, quantify the claims, etc., etc.
Can you give us a sense of how many of these widows, of these orphans are going without payment?
Tens of thousands.
Brown has pointed the finger at you, Mr. Gihwala. He said that you did not retrieve all the money you could. Once you took over, you sold off assets at lower than their true value. He said the company was viable when you took over. That's no longer the case. A response from you to that?
Francis, the position is very simple. Number one, the FSB did a comprehensive investigation into the affairs of Fidentia Group before it was placed under curatorship. During that investigation, Mr. Brown and others got up to all kinds of shenanigans to frustrate the FSB. It took months before the matter went to court. That's number one. Number two, eventually the curatorship order was granted by consent. Mr. Brown was first opposing the application and then eventually agreed to the curatorship order being granted. He tried at that time to retain a measure of influence in terms of how assets were to be disposed of, etc. And the FSB wouldn't entertain that. And the matter was then placed in the hands of the curators under the control of the court and the FSB. Next thing is, Mr. Brown always said he had buyers for assets. He was from the very inception invited to bring those buyers and let us deal with those buyers in a transparent manner. Next, we advertised in the national press to all interested parties who had an interest in any of these assets to come forward, and table the interests so we could deal with them in a transparent manner.
All right, Mr. Gihwala, I'm going to stop you there. We've run out of time, but I get your point that you maintain that you've dealt with all the assets, with all the money in your care, with fairness. Of course, that will still play out. And of course, the Fidentia's co-curator, Dines Gihwala, saying he's shocked at today's verdict against J. Arthur Brown.
News that moves. eNCA.com.